Coming up on Network Africa, 3 former South African presidents accuse President Jacob Zuma of subverting the will of the people. Plus, the World Food Programme warns of a worsening humanitarian crisis in the Central African Republic. And Italian officials rescue 560 migrants from unsafe boats off the coast of Libya. Hello and welcome to the program. I am BC Adebayo. We'll begin today in South Africa, where in an unprecedented move, 3 of the country's former presidents, F.W. de Klerk, Thabo Mbeki and Kgalema Motlanthe, have come together in Johannesburg this morning to call for discussions to address what they see as the current threats to the country's democracy. The 3 men have now united to form the National Foundation's Dialogue Initiative. Mr. de Klerk, the last president to be elected under white minority rule, told the audience that President Jacob Zuma is not upholding the constitution. While Mr. Mbeki, who took over from President Nelson Mandela, said that anyone who is undermining the constitution is essentially subverting the will of the people. He also emphasized that the aim of his role in the initiative is to let the people speak. Mr. Motlanthe, who was Mr. Zuma's predecessor, added that South Africa needs to be corruption-free. Meanwhile, South Africa's ruling African National Congress has accused the judiciary of pandering to the opposition in ordering President Jacob Zuma to explain why he fired Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan in a cabinet reshuffle. The ANC asked Zuma to appeal against Thursday's High Court ruling, which triggered large street protests against him and led to more calls for his resignation. The ANC added in a statement that the appointment of ministers and deputies, as well as reshuffling of the cabinet, is a discretionary and political decision of the president. Earlier, the main opposition Democratic Alliance had filed a court application. The party has also called for a no-confidence motion against Zuma in Parliament. Well, let's get more on this story from a South African journalist, Bazukile Diko, who joins us live from Johannesburg. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Vicky.
Now, how is the presidency reacting to the High Court ruling that President Zuma should explain why he fired the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan?
Well, Vicky, there's been no immediate statement coming from the presidency, but what I can tell you is that during the 2-hour arguments put forth by the lawyers representing the presidency and the Democratic Alliance, in court papers, President Jacob Zuma has indicated that the Democratic Alliance's urgent application to have the reasons for that recent cabinet reshuffle divulged was not only misconceived, but also without merit. The president has argued in those court papers that he was exercising his powers in terms of Section 91(2) of the Constitution, and that he took an executive decision that deserved protection from disclosure.
Now, the ANC has asked President Zuma to appeal the court ruling, saying that reshuffling his cabinet is a discretionary and political decision of the president. Is the president likely to heed this advice?
It would be hard to say, BC, but what I can certainly tell you is that at the end of the day, President Jacob Zuma is the deployee of the African National Congress. He is president of South Africa because the ANC put him forth as their candidate for president. So it would be very unlikely that he would not listen to them, but whether or not he'll appeal it, we will have to wait and see. But what we do know is that next week, that 5-day deadline will expire, and we will just have to wait and see whether or not President Jacob Zuma will indeed furnish the court with those documents that were demanded by Judge Valley. He was asked to submit records of all documents, contracts, memorandums, advice, recommendations, even reports that might have related to him making the decision to reshuffle his cabinet. You might remember, BC, that one of the issues at the center of this court case is that a so-called intelligence report was cited as one of the reasons that President Jacob Zuma sought to fire former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan along with his deputy Criticise Jonas, an intelligence report that apparently alleged that the two were conspiring with foreign forces in order to topple not only the government but President Jacob Zuma himself. Now, this intelligence report is a sticking issue, as it would seem that the Minister of State Security in South Africa is not aware of this so-called report. So at this moment, the Democratic Alliance wants to use the court to prove that perhaps this decision was an irrational one and one that was actually unlawful.
Now, have there been any reactions from the South African people regarding this issue?
Yes, absolutely. There's been a number of voices on this issue. We've even particularly seen civil society rising up and even taking to the streets and marching, calling for South Africans to stand up and save South Africa from what they call a corrupt and self-serving president whose only goal is to try and access treasury for his own benefit, with allegations of his close ties to a particular family here that is called the Gupta family. So at this moment, a lot of South Africans quite worried that if the president is making decisions on his own or whether or not they're coming from elsewhere. Days after that 30th of March decision to reshuffle the cabinet, we actually saw the deputy president of the ANC and the Secretary General of the ANC, Gwede Mandashe, coming out and saying that it would appear that this decision came from elsewhere and not from the ANC, and that the ANC was not consulted and was in fact informed, something that would seem to be out of character for how the party usually works around these issues. So a lot of voices on this, but at the end of the day, the president is constitutionally allowed and has the freedom to make any kind of changes to his cabinet without necessarily consulting anyone. So some South Africans quite on edge, wondering if the president is making his own decisions, while others are defending him and saying that the president would only make decisions based on what is best for the country.
South African journalist Bazukile Diko, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on Network Africa.